Sonic X Comic Issue 23. We start out with Sonic attacking a car on the road, being confident, and of course, since he was interrupted, he gets threatened by lasers from some flying robots right away. Because of the staff's arrogance, the artist has to have the road intersection be labeled Yardley and Flynn, as if those are the only worthwhile ones. There were plenty of good writers and artists before them, you know. Sonic jumps so that a car gets hit by a laser, and then he gets ambushed by a prison, and then he gets ambushed with something that sprays him with sleeping gas. When he wakes up, he's in shackles. Wow, it's surprising that we had Sonic get captured right at the beginning in a comic that I thought had completely given up on continuity and just became episodic and comedic. And yet already we start out with Sonic being captured. Imagine if this happened in AOSTH. Scratch and Grounder would be really competent then. He's told by some humans that he's considered a menace to the world and has to be stopped, even though he fights Eggman. So are these Eggman fanboys? No, that would have made sense, so we can't have that. He's told that he's helping to run the world ragged with Eggman, and the organizer brought all of these soldiers together, who are supposedly all kindred spirits ruined by him. Sonic is a good audience surrogate because he has no idea what any of them are talking about. If these were literal Eggman fanboys, like in Fleetway, then it would have made sense. One of the soldiers tells him that he was once the head of a section of Gun that did their dirtiest work. The president, who is called short-sighted, apparently ordered Gun off-screen to call a truce with Eggman. So the guy talking had tried to take over, naturally, and he wanted all of the Mobians to be destroyed. Okay, so is this referencing an episode of the anime? Which would be an extremely bad episode, because why would the president ever think a truce with Eggman could work? Or is it really all off-screen stuff? The story has to be so detached. What's going on? All these are anime-exclusive villains. It's the same feeling casuals get when they read an issue of a comic after skipping a bunch of issues. The story is starting out in media res, and that's confusing. You would think that this kind of story would be in the anime, since it's trying to establish a villainous team, which is entirely made up of anime-exclusive villains. Supposedly, off-screen, Sonic and his friends interfered, and the guy talking was arrested. And when the organizer freed him, Hector, Sam's biggest speed rival, as opposed to Sonic, was the one who helped him get out. Shouldn't we already know all of this? Anime or not? Like, you'd think the comic would have had these guys in it. He blames Sonic for getting him fired, because Sam said he was getting reckless, endangering lives because he wanted to be faster than Sonic. That's hypocritical of Sam. Is he somehow even worse than Sam is? Okay, so he has a reason to hate Sonic. I love that these villains all have a separate motive and backstory. Like, it's ironic, even though Sonic shouldn't be hated, these guys are all better villains than Eggman is, because they have a reason. Then some prison warden says that before Sonic was put there, no one ever escaped Prison Island under his watch. But then Amy helped him, the whole island got blasted, and that was the end of his career. You would think they would hire him again after Sonic's name was cleared. That's forced. Then a leading professor of biological studies says that he based his career on a paper proving that Sonic was a robot, and when it was proven that Sonic wasn't a robot, he was laughed out of the university and lost his tenure. Well, he didn't do any experiments or studies on Sonic directly to prove that he was a biological being or not. So of course he got that treatment. He was basing his paper on nothing but conjecture. He lost all his funding and could no longer research his Chimera projects. You know, that's really not fair to him, but yeah, like, he was basing his paper on no actual proof. That's not something a scientist does. It wasn't fair to treat him like that. Like, that just seems ridiculous. Like, one mistake, really? Then a guy named Li Yan says that Knuckles slipped through the grasp of his gang and took a Chaos Emerald he was looking for, and he wants to get back at Knuckles through Sonic. Well, this guy at least seems familiar to me. I think I saw a Sonic F episode about this guy. He was a generic gangster, right? And then Sonic is greeted by someone who was the president's top aide until Sonic's stubbornness apparently forced him to make a deal with Eggman of all people. That sounds like the product of bad writing. And he was fired and left homeless with no hope and direction. How does his stubbornness force him to do that? How is that not his fault for making that decision? It makes sense that these are bad guys, because they literally are bad guys. They're immature enough to hate Sonic for existing because it led to them making life-ruining mistakes. Which makes sense for immature, bad people. But a lot of them seem to have stupid backstories that's forced by bad writing. He references Emerald going berserk in a fighting championship in the anime that wasted his character because Cream was forced to kill him. Cream of all people. As the comic callously told us one time in one throwaway text blurb in a throwaway panel. That's how little they cared about Emerald. Sonic is told that this new villain group was formed to genocidally kill all aliens. As opposed to just antagonizing Sonic, who they would only have a reason to hate Sonic. I mean, it makes sense that in a world where, like, logically there would be some Earthlings that would do this, but it's really... At first I was really annoyed when Sonic started laughing on the floor during a serious situation where he's in shackles. And nobody knows where he is. It turns out he's laughing because the group's acronym accidentally stands for Sonic X. This is the definition of forced, because there's no reason the group wouldn't have caught this and turned down this acronym in favor of just saying aliens. Logically, it'd be called Sana instead. And that would also look like Sonic, or Sonia rather, but still. What a forced metalogic reference. Why would anyone use the word xenomorphs instead of aliens? Seriously, who would ever use that word? Ever? This story is so thoroughly unfun and boring. Can you guess who wrote this? Now, it's frustrating because all of these villains look like they have potential. I love that they're not Eggman. They have actual motives and backstories. But it's intriguing. But, like, it's such a... it's a good thing that they anticipated that the people reading the comic might not actually know who they are and would need to be recapped on their backstories. But this would be especially boring if you already knew their backstories from the anime. Nothing happens in the story other than them recapping. That's not really good. Then Sonic bends himself into a spin dash to free himself of his shackles extremely ridiculously easily in the span of one panel. With nothing happening. They don't try to threaten him with a robot. You'd think that they would shoot him instead of wasting all that time talking to them. This is their fault. And he runs out of the room that has an open door in it. And of course he jumps over these guys. I guess if he didn't escape on his own, how would any of his friends know where he is to save him? But still, this is infuriating. Instead of them doing all of this ranting, well, they had to do that since Sonic didn't know what they're telling him, but you'd think that he would have to fight a robot. It's an action series. Priorities. Well, at least there's some kind of action because Sonic easily gets out of the base using a robot laser to blast a hole through their base as he acts smug the whole time. And he stands on some metal that decides to fly away from the island he was on purely for the sake of being nice to Sonic. See, at least tries to be action-y by having him escape a base, but it could have been action-y by having him be a charming-looking robot. To be fair, while Chris was going to lead a mission to look for Sonic with a tornado, there's no way the heroes would have found Sonic anyways. Since it's not established that they have a Sonic radar with Sonic DNA, which would actually make sense. It would have been illogical of them to find him, since apparently they don't have a Sonic radar, which even the Sabrina Teenage Witch crossover and Archie thought to have a Sonic radar. Finding him should have been a simple matter. But still, would have felt much more satisfying if Sonic's friends had been the one who rescued him instead of the Gary Stu creator's pet mascot breaking out all on his own. Why did he bother listening to all these guys yammer on the whole issue then? Why didn't he break out right away? One of his canon personality traits is that he's impatient, so he would put up with all this. This whole story never should have happened. I guess it does make sense that he got captured, of course, with the sleeping gas. they justified it as well as they could have, although, again, sleeping gas, that's really oversimplifying it. Do they know his exact weight so they know exactly how much to give him so he won't overdose and it won't be too little either? They have to. I mean, of course they would know that. They hate him. They would do research on him. But the point is, if Sonic's friends had to bail him out for once, then it would be like, these guys are really threatening. Even Sonic had to be rescued from them. Instead, this happens. This issue was by Ian Flynn, of course, and it sucked. Okay, did all of these villains appear exclusively in the anime? This issue is a perfect representation of why it's crap that Sonic X shares the continuity between a comic and an anime, and you're expected to experience both at once when you might have very good reason to want to put off the anime. Rouge's voice, anyone? It's much easier to get into a comic book, as long as you have access to both it and the anime, just as easily anyways. It's much easier to get into a comic book because it has no voice acting and voice actors. This story would have been much more satisfying if instead of being nothing but recap about people that are only there in the anime, whose backstories only happened in the anime, instead their backstories happened in the comic itself. Then I would see them again in this issue and I would recognize them. But even then I'd still be really bored because then they'd be telling me stuff I already know from the past issues. You can't win either way. Either it's recap of stuff you already know, or it's recap of plots you wish you got a chance to see for yourself, and you just wish you were seeing those stories instead. But then I'd have to put up with the 4Kids voice actors and a padded out TV show rather than a comic. And TV shows always have a lot more padding to it. They're like a half an hour per episode. This was the most boring issue in the comic up to this point. Nothing happened. Which is a shame because you'd think it was surprisingly epic and gutsy because Sonic got captured by a new villainous team right away. Like, wow, that was surprising and impressive for this comic. At least Sonic's friends lampshaded that, yes, all the villains' lives being ruined were all their faults. Their lives wouldn't have been ruined if it weren't for Sonic existing, so they have good motives for being villains. But only villains against him, not against all aliens. These guys are all boring, mortal humans, which sucks. But at least they have reasons for being villains, which is much more than I can say for Eggman. But Eggman at least has a personality and was surprisingly entertaining in this comic. The whole story never should have lasted as long as it did because Sonic should have broken out on his own a long time ago, instead of listening to them all blather on. And him breaking up by himself, while mandatory to happen since the heroes don't have a Sonic radar, was underwhelming and infuriating. Chris had no way of knowing where he was to go find him for a satisfying ending, because he was captured in a completely different place from where he woke up, and it was very competent of them to capture him at least. I respected how genre savvy and capable they were to succeed that easily. But if they were really capable, they would have just shot him and not wasted all that time talking to him. Sonic getting back to his friends so easily all by himself in such a confusing way just felt lame. Especially since he was on an island, and yet he just happened to have a flying metal thing to stand on that would conveniently take him back home because it was feeling generous that day. How would it know where to go? Why would it humor him like that? It didn't have to be on an island. Was it the same island that Eggman's tower used to be on? That would be thematic, because they're basically doing Eggman's work by antagonizing Sonic. The story had me really bored and detached the minute these guys I don't know started blathering on the whole issue. And even if I did know them from the anime, I still would have been bored, because I would have already been familiar with the backstories and not cared about all that recap. And I think these guys are only going to be in the comic. This was such a sloppy, rushed introduction of this villainous group to the comic, and this is why the comic should have had its own continuity. It would have made things simpler.